Welcome to the next episode of the Just Peachy Show. I'm your host, Peachie Thompson. As you know, Just Peachy Show is a show where we interview leaders and subject matter experts in the fields of insurance, finance, and taxes. We also talk about everything and anything under the sun. Today, I am so excited to introduce to you our next guest speaker. She is an award-winning lawyer and of counsel to a couple award-winning law firms in California. So please help me in welcoming Miss Attorney Jonah Toleno. Jonah, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Peachy. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Jonah, so I'm curious. I introduced you as an award-winning off-counsel lawyer. What is off-counsel?
Thank you for asking that, Peachy. Of counsel in our industry, in the legal practice, means that you have more of an independent relationship type of affiliation with a firm. So thank you for recognizing the two firms with which I'm now affiliated. Previously, I was a partner with Shoestack Reynolds and Partners here in San Diego for over 16 years, and I still am affiliated with the firm. But now I am what you mentioned earlier of counsel. I'm more independent, and I also have joined another firm, which, as you mentioned, is also award-winning, Garcia Hong Law, also based in San Diego. That is a business and corporate and litigation and business counseling practice. So I'm really grateful to both firms for allowing me to work in these different fields. For many years at Shoestack Reynolds and Partners, I have been trial counsel, arbitration counsel in the securities and financial services industry. Recently, I have begun to expand my practice to doing more business counseling, acting as outside general counsel to businesses, including those outside of the financial services industry. And so that's where I'm taking my practice with Garcia Hong Law. And I'm honored to be affiliated with both of them.
Exciting stuff. You know, you've been around for a while, and I know you're also active in your community. So if you could share a little bit about your community involvement. I have, I cheated a little bit. Obviously, I looked at your bio, and I see that you volunteer with Friends of Scott Foundation, Urban Street Angels, your children's schools, sports leagues, and San Diego Bar Association, and to add to the list.
Yes, thanks, Peachy. That's so nice of you to take the time to look at all of that. So my kids are grown now, and they're away at college. And so leading up to that, I was very involved in their activities as well as in the community. Their activities included sports, managing softball and baseball and soccer teams, lots of fun mom stuff. But also, yes, I have been pretty active in the San Diego as well as California and national legal community. We often volunteer with different charities and foundations, some of which you've mentioned. One of the organizations I have been active with consistently for the last decade or so is Filipino American Lawyers of San Diego. I'm a past president. I served a 2-year tenure and have stayed on the board as a director and kind of in an advisory capacity. It's a very active and collaborative organization. That also is an affiliate of the National Filipino American Lawyers Association, NFALA, and I'm active there as well. We have a conference every year, and it coincides with the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. So it's become a wonderful collaboration amongst attorneys throughout the country that has provided me and all of us with a great cross-referral network. I also do volunteer with the San Diego County Bar Association, as well as Lawyers Club of San Diego, which is the preeminent organization devoted to elevating women in the legal field. So I've had my hands in a lot of different bar and community organizations. And I feel like it not only adds a great dynamic to my practice, but it's allowed me to really connect with people outside of the confines of law.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for your service to all of these foundations and, volunteer work. Definitely, it's a labor of love, and I'm thrilled first and foremost to hear that you are past president of the Filipino American Lawyers of San Diego, and. Yes. It's no secret I'm Filipino, so I'm gonna have to say excuse me to my American friends because I'm gonna speak in my native language. So mga Pilipino kong nakikinig sa amin, first time tayong magkaroon ng speaker na Filipina. So I hope that you're listening. I know Jonah marunong siya mag-Tagalog, but we can't really speak Tagalog because this is obviously an American podcast. But si yung Taglish, diba? But anyway, so to my American friends,
Taglish. Maraming salamat, Peachie.
Maraming salamat. So totally, we'll have to do a Tagalog podcast at some point, and then Jonah and I will just kind of rattle off some words that a lot of my American friends probably going to go, "Ha, what is she talking about?" Right? But so this is exciting.
That would be amazing.
Yes. So I'm
honored to be the first Filipino American on here.
Oh, yeah,
that is
yes,
it's really a privilege to be with you.
Yes, and I'm ecstatic because I have a lot of Filipino listeners, and I know that there are, how prideful we are, Pinoy pride. We have a Filipina on the show, so thank you for being here. So you mentioned yes.
Let me just take a moment to plug, since you're mentioning this, there is going to be a Pinay Power House conference in New York in March. And so if anybody's interested in that, it typically is centered around Filipino women in the legal community, but we invite anybody in any industry who wishes to collaborate and meet other Pinays nationally. So that is going to take place in New York City, in Manhattan, starting March 24 for a couple of days. And so if anybody's interested in that, I can give more information. And you are invited, Peachie, of course.
Oh,
we'll talk offline.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm actually saying that. I'm looking at my calendar already. So the 24th, we definitely need to talk about that offline. So to all my Filipina friends, you're hearing this, you're listening to this podcast, you're watching us on YouTube. If you're interested, go ahead and ping me. And at the end of this show, you know that we'll get Jonah's information where you can find her and ask her about any questions you have. So that's awesome. So Jonah, I wanted to, I picked up on what she said, right? So technically, I shouldn't say technically, but you specialize in certain aspects of the law, right? I know you have like a lot of specialties. As I'm reading about you, I'm thinking, wow, she's got a lot. So you are focusing your practice more on the business law as well as still on the financial services. But can you share a little bit about what does that mean? How is that different from other lawyers?
Absolutely. What a great question. You're right. I have specialized for the last 16 years in financial services law. Let me break that down for you a little bit because, like I said, I still have a collaborative relationship with Shoestack Reynolds and Partners. So I welcome business from there and can continue to either help service people or connect them to people in the industry. So when I talk about securities and financial services, that does run a gamut. Some of the key areas in which that practice, some of the key areas of those practices are representing financial advisors and brokers who have employment issues, who are looking to transition from one firm to another, hopefully without incurring litigation. Sometimes it's inevitable. because for a number of reasons, trade secret protection issues, although we do try to counsel our clients to do it the right way, compliant and not violate firm protocols or regulator protocols, right? The goal is to help people transfer peacefully and without litigation. But sometimes, we do have to get in the ring. There are temporary restraining orders that sometimes firms will issue to protect assets if someone is leaving. And I think what distinguishes Shoestack Reynolds and Partners from many other firms is we represent both financial advisors and firms. As long as there's no conflict of interest, we will represent firms in these same employment issues to help protect the firms and their clients, right? One area where I have also practiced is customer arbitration disputes. And that's where a customer has a claim, for instance, for fraud. Those are usually high stakes, large damages where a customer or a group of similarly situated customers and investors have unfortunately been defrauded, in a number of different ways. And we will be hired in those scenarios to try to recoup their investment. What that allows us to do as a small boutique firm is basically see both sides of disputes. So we know the litigation and arbitration arena front and back from the perspective of both claimant and respondent, plaintiff and defendant. Like I said, as long as there's no conflict of interest, we are able to navigate those practice areas with ease and skill. I also historically have represented individuals and firms in SEC regulatory investigations and inquiries. The SEC is probably, as most of your listeners know, but just in case not, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, which is at the federal level and is charged with oversight and protection of investors. We also do a lot of FINRA, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority arbitrations and investigations. So really a lot of different practice areas under financial services and securities.
So I have a question on that. Before we move on, Jonah. So would you represent, I know you said you could represent both the employee and the company, for example, but if there was, if we're talking about FINRA or SEC, are you usually hired by the consumer or are you hired by the companies?
Great question. In those scenarios, we typically are representing a company or an individual financial advisor. So, just like any industry, of course, there are good apples and bad apples.
Yes.
But because, you're in financial services, Peachie, the intricacies and complexities of regulation. It's very easy to get tripped up. And, it's nobody's perfect. And so sometimes something will catch the regulator's eye and they want to inquire, what happened with this transaction? Please explain to us, X, Y, and Z. And so a lot of times we will respond to the regulator on behalf of the individual advisor, or if the firm is our client, then on behalf of the firm.
Got it. And how long have you been doing this, Jonah? I know you've been around, and let's not date ourselves, but I'm curious.
Yeah. So I have been licensed to practice law in California for 22 years. And
wow.
Yes, it's been a long and very dynamic and fulfilling career, and I'm still at it. So I graduated from what was called back then University of California, Hastings College of the Law in San Francisco in 2000. That same year, I passed the bar in California. And I also am licensed in the state of Arizona for 18 years now.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Because that was my next question is, can you practice outside of California? So you answered that you can do it in Arizona. So is there a particular reason why Arizona? Do you have a home office there? You have...
To be perfectly candid, Peachy, I followed a boy to Arizona.
Oh, I love it.
I met my husband of 21 years in law school in San Francisco. And I was a year ahead of him. And his first job out of law school was, in fact, with a large firm, Snell and Wilmer, in Phoenix, Arizona. And so we moved out there. It was a little bit cheaper to live out there than in the San Francisco Bay Area. And
sure.
By the time we moved out, we had our baby girl. And so I was able to stay home with her, and we had our son in Arizona for a couple of years. And then I went to take the Arizona bar and worked as an Arizona attorney for a few years till we moved back to San Diego in 2006.
I love it. I love it. So you clearly love warmer weather, nicer weather. So that's good.
Yes.
I'm with you in that.
Also, Peachy, you had asked about being able to practice elsewhere.
Yes.
So one good thing about the securities practice is we can practice nationally and even internationally. So some of the bar licensure regulations don't always apply in FINRA arbitration or in SEC investigations. So a lot of times we can do arbitration and business counseling all throughout the United States. And in fact, I do have clients everywhere. I have tried cases in Texas. I have a client in New York City that involves some securities and business counseling as well, really all over.
That's awesome. That's really good to know. That's really good to know. I know I was reading about some of the things that you've done too, and I was curious. There's this thing called alternative dispute resolution. So what exactly is that when you specialize in that? Because I know you specialize in that too. If you could explain that, we have consumers that are not very familiar with the law, and what is that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it's actually a big part of the law that people may not be aware of. So let me start, before I go to the alternate portion of that phrase, dispute resolution, right? That is just what it sounds like. There's a dispute and there's needs to be a resolution. A lot of times that takes place in court. A lawsuit is filed. If the parties could not resolve it, then someone files a lawsuit and they take the claim to either state court or federal court, depending on where you are and the nature of the dispute. Alternative dispute resolution is exactly that, an alternative to state or court litigation. And typically that is in the form of arbitration. Arbitration is meant to be more of an informal, hopefully more streamlined and faster process of resolving that dispute. Some of the arbitration forums that we call them, where that dispute could potentially be resolved, are the American Arbitration Association, abbreviated as AAA, not to be confused with AAA automobile insurance, Peachy. Yeah. Like I said, FINRA arbitration, that is where most securities and financial services disputes by default through contract between the parties is resolved or are resolved before the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. So it's a private alternative means of trying to resolve a dispute. Depending on the forum, it can get expensive, but there are many benefits to it that kind of, like I said, try to streamline the process as opposed to being in court where it can really take a long time to adjudicate a case or to resolve a case.
Yeah. And you answered my question before I even asked it, because I was going to ask, like, so what's the pro to that? And it sounds to me that that's definitely something you want to do instead of going through the lengthy process of our judicial system. And if you're able to resolve something before going to that length, then I think that that's a good thing. I would imagine that that's a win-win for both parties.
It is. I'll just add, though, Peachy, for the benefit of your listeners and someone who might be bound by an arbitration agreement, say in their employment contract, I do want to be candid that because it is private and arbitrators are paid for their time, it can get expensive. So, the pros and cons need to be weighed in the big picture. That, frankly, is a whole other long discussion, and I'm happy to answer separate questions on it. But, you see a lot of those because a lot of those arbitration provisions, because the hope is to resolve it quickly, but they can get very costly because you're paying for certain services, whereas in court, the judges are paid with the taxpayer money, right? And so we, as participants to the dispute, meaning someone who filed a lawsuit, we're not paying the fees of the court. So it's pros and cons to weigh.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, clearly, see, that this is why we have a lawyer answer these questions, guys. This is why we have you. So I am curious. You've been around for so long. There must be a very challenging case that you've tried in the past, or maybe even a favorite case of yours. And you don't have to give us very specific information, but maybe some general idea of what that is, Jonah, and why is it the most challenging or one of your favorite cases?
Sure. I'm happy to answer that, within the confines of what I can reveal.
Yeah.
I will say that in general, a lot of my securities and financial services and investment fraud cases are just very challenging to begin with. So it's a tough arena because it can be stressful. It takes a long time to get from the beginning of filing a claim all the way to the end if you go all the way to trial. Most cases statistically settle, but even that requires a lot of work. So there is a component of challenge inherently in these cases, but one of the favorite ones and also challenging that comes to mind, and I can talk about this because it did go all the way to arbitration, to an award, which is public in FINRA. But I represented an elderly Holocaust survivor. And I called her Grandma Rose. She was around the same age of my grandmother. And she unfortunately had been severely defrauded by the respondents that we had filed a claim against. And she was just the sweetest, most optimistic woman, despite the trials she had been through in her life. And I'm allowed to talk about this portion of her life. She unfortunately and her family were taken to Auschwitz during World War II, and she was separated from her family. But because for some reason, the guards neglected to tattoo the prison number on her arm, she and another girl, my client was 9 years old at the time, were able to escape in the middle of the night and were taken in by some, good Samaritans. And she eventually grew up and found her way to the United States, and she found the love of her life. And together they had an apartment building that was the main source of their income for many decades. And someone convinced her to sell that and put her into a risky investment. And so the reason, Peachy, I say that is one of the most challenging, but also one of my very favorite cases is, number one, we did prevail after a lot of hard work and a couple years of working that case up. But it's my favorite because even despite what she'd been through, every day she showed up to the hearing, very modestly dressed and just had a sunny outlook on life still.
Yeah.
And what mattered to her was that we were attempting to get justice for her. And of course, the outcome also mattered to her, but it was that she made me feel like I helped give her a voice. And the things and the horror she had been through and seeing her family get ripped away from her just really reminded me that life is very precious. And yes, we all have problems and issues and they're real, but you see someone like that who prevails in life and sustains. And it was just a beautiful, touching experience, and really one of the greatest privileges of my career to represent her. Rest in peace, Grandma Rose, but her mark on my soul is indelible.
Oh yeah, Grandma Rose. So, and that must, and I feel I could feel you're just speaking about that must have solidified your decision to go into this profession. What a good way to help someone who was wronged, and for you to be able to, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to say, to kick ass and take care of that is awesome, right? I've never done that on the show just because, I feel like that was a very, very good, that's a very good story. So,
thanks, Peachie, and credit goes to her for kicking ass, if you will.
Yeah. So, I know we don't want to take a lot more of your time. You're very busy. I really appreciate you being here on the show today. And this is going to be a very open-ended question. If you have any tips, or do you have any tips for our listeners to help avoid having to deal with litigation? I mean, it's a big question, at work or in their personal lives. Like, what would that be?
That is a very good question. And let me think for a second on that, Peachie. I think let me start with the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a litigator, I can see a lot of scenarios that are potential for blowing up. But again, because I'm now doing more business counseling, that's actually sort of that encapsulates what I'm trying to do now. So it's a great question for me personally, too. Let me start with sort of the work and professional arena. I would say when entering into a deal or a partnership or an arrangement, in writing is always best. Okay. I know that handshake deals are out there. Friends go into business all the time. And there's often this sense that, we love each other. Everything is so great. It's going to be hunky dory. That stuff's not important. Let's just shake on the key terms, and literally handshake, right?
Yeah.
Open paper it. No matter which side you're on, whether you're the employer or employee, or you're entering into a contract with someone for services, in writing is always best, because that memorializes the intent of the parties. And then if you are presented with a writing as an individual, a written contract, read it, read everything, and ask questions of the person who gave it to you, or a third party who may have expertise in this area. Let's say you're an employee and you're presented with an employment contract, and it has an arbitration provision, just like we talked about. If you don't understand what that means, ask before you sign. So many people and so many of the disputes that I've seen arise out of, well, I signed it, but I didn't understand it, or I didn't read it.
Yeah.
Right. Communication fundamentally is always key in any scenario. I think I would say that the same principles apply in your personal life. The more we communicate with each other, the more we establish what are the issues and questions and talk about it, the clearer things are. We're in this age now, Peachie, of instantaneous information with the internet, social media, email. Everything is so fast, right?
Yes.
And so for me, I think we want to slow down. I always tell people I'm supervising, take a moment before you send that email. Triple check, make sure it says what you want it to say, spell check, make sure it's clear. So in personal life, really listen. If there is a potential dispute brewing, the first thing to do, I think, is to communicate and not bury your head in the sand. So I don't know if that's a little too abstract.
Oh no,
that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And there's a lot of golden nuggets in those few statements you just said. Really, getting it in writing, openly communicate, and don't, and read it, right? Read it. I've had many times that throughout my career also have seen and have read ironclad non-competes. And people have come to me and say, what do you think? I'm like, I always say, listen, I'm not a lawyer. You can't, you're going to need to have a lawyer read this. If you didn't read it, I don't know that you can make that move, or maybe you can, who knows, right? Because all those little languages in the contract, it's not something that you just should take lightly and sign and say, you know what, I do not understand.
Because that one example it's got different states' laws applying to it. In California, it's very hard to enforce a non-compete. Other states, I think, kind of are in that same genre, but it's not always the case. So you're right to refer them to a lawyer. But I'm just going to plug you for a minute, Peachie, because I've had the opportunity of working alongside you and presenting with you. And you really are an expert in your area of insurance. So just for the area that you are in, if anybody has questions about insurance or a policy or terms, the concept of it, please call Peachie Thompson. Okay. She is such an expert in this field. I've watched you present and you really know your area like the back of your hand. So you'd be an example of somebody I would recommend for asking a third party to get expertise, if not legal, right? But in your area.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jonah. It really means a lot. And yes, I always enjoy presenting and co-presenting with you. And I have probably more, if not mutual respect for how you do things and what you do. So I really appreciate that. So now, like I said, I can't talk to you all day about this, but the time has come. So if anyone has any questions, what is your preferred way for people to get in touch with you?
Sure. Because I'm primarily practicing out of Garcia Hong Law now, and my partner there is Valerie Garcia Hong, just for purposes of identifying us like online. I would say an email to me, and I'll spell it out. Jonah, JONAH at GarciaHongLaw.com. All one word in the domain, no punctuation. So that's GARCIAHON, like Nancy, GLAW.com. That's probably the best way. Or they can contact you, Peachie, if you don't mind, and you can just forward it right over to me.
Absolutely.
The email would be best. And you can do a Google search for me online, Jonah Toleno, TOLENO, and see what you find there. But usually there's contact information there online also.
Perfect. So I want to say last few words before I officially thank you, Jonah. And this will be again in Tagalog because I am so excited that we have a Filipina on the show and I can't wait to air this episode. Is that, sa mga nakikinig sa amin, I am so proud na nandito si Jonah today and she is napaka-successful na Filipina. So Pinay Pride is here, so I'm excited. Jonah, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you and I look forward to the next time we see each other.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Peachie. What a touching message. And the honor is all mine. Thank you to anybody that took the time to listen to this. I'm a huge fan of you, Peachie. I agree. Pinay Pride talaga is here. And I just really appreciate the opportunity. It's very humbling to be able to talk about this with you. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jonah. Bye. Information shared during the show are opinions of the speakers. They are not legal, financial, or tax advice specific to you. Consult your own specialist, attorney, accountant, financial planner, or insurance advisor for your specific situation.